Hi everyone, welcome to another game between AlphaZero as white and Stockfish as black. Knight f3 by AlphaZero, e6, c4, knight f6, knight c3, bishop to b4, queen c2, castles, a3. Bishop takes knight, queen takes knight. We have a minor piece imbalance here after bishop takes knight. AlphaZero has the two bishops. d6, b4, gaining space on the queen side and opening up the b2 square for the bishop. e5, the pawn on e5 will block the bishop on b2. Therefore, AlphaZero's long-term plan here was to play d4, attacking the pawn on e5. If you can get rid of this pawn, then the diagonal will be open for the bishop. Knight on b to d7, e3, rook e8, d3, knight f8, bishop to e2, a5. Applying some pressure to white's queen side, it is best just to keep the tension here. For example, b5 maybe looks quite tempting, but it leaves the c5 square weak. Black would bring the knight back to d7 and aim to jump into this nice c5 square. You could try d4 to defend that square, but after e takes, the e-file has been nicely opened for black's rooks. So after a5, just castles. Bishop to g4, h3, bishop h5, queen c2, h6, bishop to c3. The queen is maybe going to come to b2, creating a lot of pressure up the diagonal. b6 weakens the c6 square, making b5 now an acceptable move. Yes, it does give up the c5 square, but c6 is looking like a nice hole for white knight. The knight comes to d7, rook on a to d1, knight c5. Bishop to a1, bishop to g6. d3 is a little bit weak here, so black applies pressure, but it is adequately defended. Queen b2, knight a4, queen a2, the knight comes back to c5. I guess the idea was just to misplace the queen. d4. E takes d4, knight takes d4, and you can see that this bishop on a1 is going to be so powerful up this diagonal, and black does not have its dark squared bishop to challenge it, so this bishop on a1 could actually become uncontested. Knight on d4 aims at the c6 square here, so bishop e4 is played to defend that square, but now bishop to f3 by white, and white trades off this pretty strong bishop. Bishop takes f3, g takes f3. Okay, h3 is weakened, but the rook is going to come to g1 at some point. The g file is opened. g7 is a really weak point in black's position. Knight on f to e6, king h2. Knight takes d4, rook takes d4. And now g7 really is feeling very weak after rook to g4. King h7, queen c2 check, and g6. If you bring the king back, say, rook to g4 as I said before, and there's so much pressure on black's position here, you maybe like g6 might just lose to rook takes g6 check. And I think there'd be a mate on the board. Yep. So, after queen c2 check, g6, but after rook f4, the diagonal is fully open for the bishop on a1. And it is not going to be challenged. As I said before, black has lost its dark squared bishop. Queen e7, rook to g1. g6 is actually a weak point because h4, h5 is a big idea for white here, applying a lot of pressure. So after rook g8, h4, black had to play h5 to stop h5 by white, but this weakens even more dark squares, and also the g5 square. Rook to g5, and now there is a threat of mate and pawn. Rook takes h5. Keep in mind the g6 pawn is pinned. King comes to h6 to defend h5, e4, knight e6, forking the rooks, but it doesn't really matter because, well, after white loses an exchange, these rooks, they're not going to have any open files, so it's still going to be good for white. Rook comes to f6, knight takes g5, h takes g5, king h7, taking g5, just queen d2 check, and the king is not going to be able to retreat, have to come to h4, but then there's just mate. So after h takes g5, king h7, but as I said before, these rooks have no open files, and the dark square control here is just huge. f4, rook a e8, queen d3, rook g7, f3, king g8, queen to d4, king f8, and surprisingly there's no like straight win for white here. It looks like there should be something, but rook e6 for example, just f takes rook, and you can't take the rook because of queen takes. So bishop c3, and yeah, there's actually nothing immediate here. Rook g8, a4, rook d8, king h3. White's plan is actually to play this pawn lever f5, and after g takes f5, h5 will be weak, the king will come up and pick it up. Rook d7, f5, g takes f5, rook takes f5, queen e6, you can't take this pawn on g5 because of queen h8, check, rook would have to come back, but now bishop g7, king e8, and this is going to be mate. So, queen e6, king to h4, the king just picks up the pawn. Rook e7, queen d5, rook g6, king takes h5, rook e8, bishop to f6. This is a very pretty position. Look at this bishop. Just controls everything. Queen d7, king g4, rook c8, queen c6. Queen e8, queen takes queen, king takes queen. And white still just has a huge advantage here. The bishop is just far better than either of black's rooks. So much so that black feels inclined to just take it off. But the endgame seems to be winning for white. White has a bit of a pawn majority on this side of the board here, 3 against 2 really, so that means a pass pawn can be made. And in this position, the rook cuts off the king from helping defend. Rook h5 check, king g4, rook h8, king d3, and Stockfish resigned. Some point white will break with e6, and after f takes f7, the pawn will promote. Okay, thank you very much for watching.